and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. We are going to wait just a few more minutes to let people sort of log on, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Couple of ground rules. We do have the chat feature off to the side. I have turned all comments to private so that we can see them, but you won't be able to see each other's. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can put them there, and I will do my best to answer them throughout the presentation. Also, if you have any personal questions, deeply personal questions, please do not ask them in this forum. Even though it is private, I would prefer that any personal questions be asked in a one-on-one because there's no attorney-client privilege in a group setting. So thank you again, and we'll get started in just a bit. All right, so today we're going to be talking about protecting your children's future when you're not there to guide them. How do we help protect our families and our kids, particularly in this moment of global pandemic, where we are all sort of feeling our own mortality at this point? Parenthood right now under quarantine is a mess. But parenting a toddler in this time of quarantine, when we can't go outside, we can't do anything, is a little bit nerve-wracking. We definitely try to be zen, but parenthood in quarantine is challenging, especially if you're working from home and trying to manage your house, all of those things. So we're in a very, very stressful moment at this point. Some of the concerns that our clients have expressed to us is that they don't want any government interference. They don't want any taxes or fees on their estates if something were to happen to them. Not so much a concern here, but avoiding nursing home costs. What we don't know about COVID-19 is what the long-term effects are going to be. They're starting to show some deterioration in people's lungs, as well as kidney issues and liver issues. And so we are starting to worry that there might be some long-term health effects from having contracted COVID-19. Creditors and predators for beneficiaries is another major concern of our clients. Family fighting over money is a big one. We hear that one all the time. People are very concerned that family fighting over money is going to rip apart their family at an already stressful and sad time. And then not having something in their plan that's going to pass on more than just their money, right? Their values, their wisdoms, their life lessons. I don't know about you all, but I know for a fact that I know more than my son does, right? He's 2. I should know more than he does. How do I pass on my life lessons and my wisdom and my values to him if I'm not there? So we're going to cover some of these things today. And I just want to make sure, can you guys all hear and see me? If you could just put it right in the chat, that will let me know. Okay, perfect, perfect. So a lot of people will say that estate planning is not something that they need. It's not something that they're concerned about. But let's look at that argument a different way, right? They're like, oh, I'll do it later. How many of you have had your house burned down? If anyone has a house that burned down, no, okay. But yet we have insurance for our homes, right? In the event something would happen, because we know that if our house were to burn down, the economic cost of that would be too high that we need to insure against it, despite the fact that almost everybody on this chat has said that they have never had their house burned down. Let's be clear, it is very important for us as young people, specifically with minor children, to make sure we have an effective estate plan in place. Approximately 40% of all of those people in the ICU right now with COVID complications are under the age of 50. This idea that was touted that this is an old person's disease is just false. So what is the risk to our children if we don't have a plan in place? We're going to walk through what the process looks like if something were to happen to us and we don't have an effective plan. So if we contract this virus, what happens? Again, my true legacy is my child. I'm sure that is similar for you guys as well. So this is me. My name is Portia Wood. I've been an attorney at law since 2011. I have my BA in journalism from Cal State University, Northridge, a JD from the University of Maryland School of Law, a dual LLM from Pepperdine University School of Law. I am founding partner of Wood Legal Group LLP, along with my mother, who is my partner in law. We are members of the American Academy of Estate Planning Attorneys, and I am a 2017, 2018, and 2019 National Black Lawyers Top 40 Under 40, and mom to a 2.5-year-old little boo. And that is him, obviously not now, but one of the most important reasons why I do what I do is my son, Emerson. When I was pregnant, I started asking my friends and my community members, hey, what did you guys do in terms of naming guardians? And how did you set up your trust to do X, Y, and Z? Because I had taken a class in law school on estates and trusts. It was an elective and it was sort of accidental, right? It fit into my schedule. So I knew to ask these questions, and the responses I got back were blank stares from a lot of my contemporaries, basically not really understanding what I was asking or why, or sort of misinformation. Oh, I had a conversation with my mom. She's totally going to take our kids if something happens to us. And that led me to realize that I had more knowledge about this topic than those people around me. And that's sort of where this seminar comes from and why we do it. So one of the most important reasons why I do what I do is that making sure that everybody's family has the right information and that they're protected, because no child should end up in CPS care or find that there's no inheritance or have nothing left from their parents because they didn't prepare appropriately. So there are two main reasons why people don't do this. The first one, procrastination. As young people, we are like, there's so many other things that are much more important right now that we can do this later, right? Tomorrow. And then tomorrow never comes, right? Second is a lack of knowledge. You do not know what you do not know. So if you don't know why you need to protect yourself or what types of things you need to protect yourself, you won't know to do it. And so those are really the main reasons we've seen that people don't plan. They either think that they have more time or they don't really know what they need to do and sort of have this idea that what they did was enough, right? Oh, I talked to my mom. So knowing, is it enough? I'm going to provide you all with the knowledge, but my goal is to really inspire you into action, right? I know that if I eat better and I get up and go walking, that I will lose what I'm still calling baby weight, right? But I have lost 0 pounds because I know that, right? I actually have to implement. And so I'm hoping that at the end of this webinar, you will implement some of this stuff and talk to your local attorney to get it taken care of. Now, at the end of this, everybody who sort of makes it all the way through will get a 30-minute virtual consultation with me to have a conversation about your personal questions. I know I said it in the beginning, but I'm going to say it again. Please, please, please do not ask those personal questions in this forum. There is no attorney-client privilege in this forum, so please don't ask them here. Use this free consultation as an opportunity to ask those personal questions then. Any questions you ask here, please try to make them general. So that they're not so specific to you. Now, here is a question that I'm going to pose to the group. You do not have to put your answer in the chat, but I want you to think about it. What would happen to your children if something catastrophic happened to you? And not so general, but specific. If you had to go to the hospital who would care for them? If you had to stay in the hospital for an extended period of time, who would come and get them? Where would they stay? Where would they go? Who would have the legal authority to take care of them? And during this time of COVID, where if one person in the household gets sick, the likelihood is that everybody's going to get sick. If you're too sick to make medical decisions for your child, who has the legal authority to do so in your place? Do you know who that is? I want you to think about that because we're going to go through it and we're going to talk about it. So here's the scenario. You've just learned that someone close to you has contracted coronavirus. And all of a sudden you're wondering, did I see that person? Do I have symptoms? Might I have been exposed? All of a sudden you start to feel ill. You're having difficulty breathing. Right? You get a test, one of those elusive tests that most people are having a difficult time getting. But you get a test and you've got a positive. And now what? Now what happens? This is a very common scenario, and it is increasing. The US has reported more than 46,000 coronavirus-related deaths, and they think that that number is underreported. We have more than 835,000 cases across all 50 states. Those are confirmed cases, and almost 3 million confirmed cases worldwide, and that number just continues to go up. So what are the possibilities, right? One, you're seriously injured and you're in the hospital for some unknown period of time, or two, you succumb to the virus and you won't be coming home at all. There is, of course, a third possibility, right? You have a mild case, you recover at home, there's no need for this. We know what that process looks like. So what we want to look at is what happens in these other situations that where people don't really know how the process works. So the first, you're in the hospital, they're rushing you to the ICU, and that's where you are. I understand that you have a mother or a father or a friend or a neighbor who would absolutely step up and take in your kids in that instance. But what I need you to understand is that they do not have the legal authority to do so. So if you have minor children at home and they no longer have an authorized guardian, Child Protective Services may be notified. And what they'll say is that their minor children home alone without authorized legal guardians. Your parent is not an authorized legal guardian. Additionally, if there are no powers of attorney for you or advanced healthcare directives for you, then your family may also need to do a living probate depending on how incapacitated you are. The concern with that, it's called a conservatorship or a guardianship proceeding. Someone to be legally authorized to make decisions for you if you're too sick to make them. And fun fact, your spouse is not automatically your first fiduciary. They're not automatically legally authorized just because you said I do. You have to designate someone, or the courts have to designate someone. Additionally, if you don't want to be left on a ventilator, you have to put those wishes in writing. Or if you have them in writing and you still want treatment for corona, the only treatment for corona is a ventilator at this point. So you need to update those documents specifically for this moment. What is living probate? It is a proceeding in which your family or your friends would go to court to ask for the legal authority to take care of you, to make your medical and property decisions if you haven't designated someone. It is humiliating. The court is in control completely. It takes a long time, and right now the courts are not operating at full capacity, which means it might be a long period of time before your family can access your bank accounts. And if you have minor kids at home, who's going to care for them, right? It's also extremely expensive. So what happens to your kids in this moment if you don't have a document? CPS will come in, depending on what time it is, they may take them into a foster home or an emergency shelter until emergency guardianship can be established. Ultimately, they will be released to a family member or a friend or some other court-approved guardian, assuming the courts are open and functioning at this point in time. It may take much longer for them to get released than a normal course. So what is an authorized guardian? Who is an authorized guardian? Legal directive from the parents or a court order. And people say to me all the time, they go, but why would they put my kids in a shelter if my mother's right here? Well, without some direction, the court has no idea who in your family you would want to have your kids. They don't know if you have a good relationship with your parents or if they're really your parents or any of those things. And so to do their job well, they have to vet whoever they're going to put your child with. And we want them to do that, right? We wouldn't just want them to give our children to the neighbor and we hate the neighbor. But it does mean that if we don't take the steps to protect them and to guide the courts and the government systems, they have to figure it out for themselves. And that period, that interim period between when you get ill and when they finally figure out who's a good person, your child is sort of blowing in the wind. So what exactly does a suitable guardian mean? Two methods. One, an emergency guardianship form signed and notarized by the parents or legal guardians. Everybody who is on this call will get one now. And I do notice that a couple people said that they might have to pop up early. So I'm going to send this one out into, I'm going to send you a handout now. There's one for Maryland as well as one for California. You can download it directly in the handout section. This emergency guardianship form you need to sign. You also need to notarize it. You will also need the people you are picking to sign and notarize because they have to accept the responsibility. In this moment right now, they can probably not sign as long as they're willing to do it. The only other way, if you don't have this document, is for the court to approve someone. So we don't want that situation, right? This is temporary. It's a temporary emergency guardianship form in the event you are incapacitated for some period of time, but going to come home. It is also a healthcare directive that picks a person who can make your child's healthcare decisions if you are also unable to do so, okay? If you are not coming back, so you succumb to this virus, and now we need to find a permanent place for your children to go, we have to name those people as well. Additionally, if you personally don't have your estate plan in place, your family may also have to go through what's called a death probate. This is to get the assets that are in your name transferred out of your name, either to your kids, to your spouse, or to your other family members. This is a long process on a regular day. It takes about 18 months to 2 years in California, uncontested. And we have seen probates that have gone on for 15 plus years. In fact, I had a client in my office just recently whose father's estate has been in probate for 15 years. It's a lot, and there's not a lot of resources left in that estate after all of this time. So we want to avoid death probate if possible. But for our kids, we need to find long-term permanent guardianship, and those proceedings in court are extremely complex because they have to pick the people who will raise your kids to 18. That's complicated because they don't know your family. They don't know your family structure. And oftentimes you have in-laws that will fight from both sides because both sides believe that they're the right people to take care of the kids. So we see them battling, and it's not, typically not because they don't like each other or think that the other person wouldn't be good, but it's typically that they think that they would do a better job. Also, their child just died. And so they want the grandkids as sort of a part of the healing process for themselves as well as for the children. They want to be responsible. But what that does is it leaves the remaining people who should be loving on your children fighting each other, and your children, again, sort of sitting there wondering why. So is there a solution? Obviously, or otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? Parental nominations of emergency guardians. That is the form that I just put in the handout section. Fill it out. You can have multiple of these forms. In fact, I have a few. I have one for my parents, but they don't live in my state, and so I have one for my aunt and I have one for my sister-in-law. There is a section that talks about when somebody's authority ends, and you can stagger it. You can say this person's authority, my next door neighbor who I really like, their authority lasts until my aunt or my sister or my best friend gets there. And then their authority lasts until whoever the final person is that you want your child to be with. Stagger it, because you have no idea where people will be when it's time to use the documents. Okay? And you want to make sure they have a copy, because if they don't have a copy, it doesn't exist. They have to be able to present it. So what makes a good guardian? And this is a fun one. People are always saying things to me like, a good guardian, money, right? Kids are expensive. I mean, preschool's like $3,000 a month. I mean, kids are expensive. But should money be the primary factor when you're thinking about who should take care of your child, right? I would argue no, because that's probably just not the right factor or primary factor. What makes a good guardian, in my opinion, I would say parenting philosophies. We want to have that conversation. What is their philosophy about parenting? What are their religious beliefs? Does it matter to you, right? Are they orthodox and you are agnostic? Because those beliefs in their household will affect the way that your child is raised. And does that matter to you? Location and geography. They're in a state like California, where we've got Governor Gavin Newsom, who is kicking butt on this corona response, or in a place like Georgia, where they're getting ready to open things up. Does that matter to you? Because that's going to affect their upbringing as well as their view of the world. And so location and geography of your potential guardian, you have to think about the community as well that your child will be growing up in. Discipline style. Are you a 1, 2, 3 timeout person and they're a spanker? Does that matter to you? Only you know whether that's important, but it's something we have to think about when we're picking our guardians. What are their personal values? What's their personality type, right? Are you a bubbly, outdoorsy go-getter and they are in the house sort of like to read a book person? That's going to change the kind of interaction that your child gets. Does that matter to you? And then temperament. These are things that we think you should be looking at when you're thinking about guardians. Now, when we are talking about money, it is our job to adequately fund our children's future. We cannot, and I repeat, cannot put that responsibility on somebody else's shoulders. One, because it's just rude, but they can decline, and people do decline even when you name them. And one of the reasons is they cannot economically take on the responsibility of another child, right? We are basically saying we failed to plan, so now you have to adjust your entire life to make up for our failure to plan. And people say no, right? And so we have to make sure that we are adequately funding our children's future as well. And then what does that look like, right? Get a life insurance policy. We have an insurable interest, right? At least until our kids go to 18 on a 15-year level term. And I had one of my life insurance friends, agents, pull this. If you're a 35-year-old woman and you're a non-smoker and you want $1 million, it costs about $31 per month. I mean, we can set these things up. Yeah, term is not great. At the end of 15 years, it will be gone. But for the period in which your children are minors, making sure that there are going to be resources available for them if something were to happen to you is incredibly important, right? Life insurance is changing, right? These numbers were pre-COVID. Right now, you can't do medical exams. So there are some life insurance companies that are approving people up to $1 million without a medical exam. It takes like 10 minutes, but it's not a great rate. So the numbers are a little bit different. Some life insurance carriers have stopped issuing new policies altogether. In the wake of COVID, they have just stopped issuing new policies. There is also some news that's coming down that they may actually change the qualifications. And if you contract COVID, even if you get mild symptoms and recover, they may still deny you going forward because we don't know what the long-term effects on your body are going to be. So until these changes come in, now's a really good time to try to get some life insurance if you don't have any. Also, if you have it through your job, check your policies. Typically, it's only about 2.5 years of salary on an average, right? And if you leave that job or you're laid off from that job, that policy is gone. So going to the private market might also be helpful for you. Another thing we want to think about is, are they parent material? Do they already have a relationship with your children? Or will it be like a child showing up at, Daddy Warbucks' house and he's never met them? We want to make sure that we are easing this transition in the event we are not there for our kids, that they have an easy transition into the next place that they have to go, that it's minimizing their trauma, right? Other important questions to ask: how many children do they have? If they have 5 kids and you have 1, is it okay for you that your child is now going to be one of 6? Because their personalized attention will be different. Does that matter? If you have 6 and they have 1, do they want that many kids? Are they even capable of handling that many kids, right? Do they plan on having more? So that's an attention issue. If they have a newborn baby in the house and you've got 2 young kids, will your kids get the amount of attention that they need? Are their children older or younger than your children? If they've got 18-year-olds that are about to leave the house and they're about to be empty nesters and go traveling the world, and you give them a 2-year-old, will they want that? And do they want to sign up for another 18 years or 16 years at that point? Do they have the time and energy? And I don't mean today, right? Of course, today they probably have the time and energy. But if your child is 2, in 10 years, will they still have the time and the energy to raise your child? I had this, sort of awkward conversation with my parents. My dad is in his 70s, and he's like, I would love nothing more than to take Emerson to his soccer games and cheer him on. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, you're young and healthy right now. But in 10 years, when he's 12 and you're 80, I'm not trying to make my child a premature caregiver. And when he's 16 and starts doing weird stuff and you're almost 90, either they're going to have to process you passing away and then a new transition to another house, or it's just going to be a free-for-all. I don't think that makes the most sense. So even though I know that today they would be capable right now to take him in, we have to think about, well, what about 10 and 15 years from now? And then the next question is, can they take my children if my children have been exposed to COVID, right? Because if I've passed away from COVID, that means my children have likely been exposed as well. And, can they take my children in, or my child, right, in my case? Do they have any underlying conditions, right? Have they been exposed? Would we be putting their family at risk in that case? And so there's a lot of considerations when we're thinking about who would make a good guardian for our kids. Are they physically and emotionally able to care for your children? Like I said, my dad, he could totally do it today. But in 10 years, I don't know that that's going to be the best fit. And I've got to think longevity, because whatever we plan today is what our children have to deal with for the rest of their lives. So when you look at the picture, who would you want to raise your kids? And it's always so funny because people say to me, oh, you're making a judgment, or there's one picture that's right. There's none of these are right or wrong, right? It's what is right or wrong for you and for your family. And that is something only you can decide, right? I can't tell you which one's right or wrong. Only you can decide what matters to you and which one is important to you. The other thing to think about is local school districts. If you are in a district where you can send your kids to public school and they can get a great education, but your guardians are in a 1 or 2 out of 10 school district, does that matter to you? And are there enough resources then to factor in a private school education, or are you comfortable with them going to the public school that is not so great? I mean, again, that's going to depend on your values, but we have to think about it. It's more than just, you're my sibling, great, here's my kid, if something happens to me. What does that actually look like? Now, equally as important, is there someone you do not want considered on your guardian list? If you don't want someone that's in your family to ever be considered for guardian of your children, you need to write that down. Because if you don't have a proper estate plan in place, whoever controls your children controls their inheritance. If you believe that there are people in your family who would show up and try to get custody of your children to be able to control their inheritance, you need to write down that you do not want them considered. Okay? And it doesn't have to be, they're an alcoholic, they're terrible, they're this. No, it could just be, our parenting philosophies do not align, and I do not want them considered for guardianship of my children. And it is literally as simple as that. All you want to do is make sure that you are alerting the court that that is not a person you want your children going to. You don't have to tell them why, because they can read between the lines, right? But you do have to write it down. It's important to say it. What we are trying to create, right, is some image of us. You know, someone who's got maybe a similar personality to us, or temperament, or parenting style. Somebody who thinks along the lines that we do, so their child can get some of those experiences. We're trying to give them us without us being present, right? And it's not easy, and you're never gonna get it just right, but we wanna make sure we're at least thinking about it. So there are 4 types of guardians, and we're gonna talk about what those 4 are very briefly. One is your emergency guardian. This is your very first alternate if something happens to you. If you get sick, you're in a car accident, even if you just go on vacation, which I know is not a thing right now, but if you are going on vacation and you are leaving your children behind, you are technically leaving them without an authorized guardian. Now, most of the time, nothing happens. But if something were to happen, the person you've left them with does not have legal authority to have your kids. They need this emergency guardianship form to have your kids for a temporary period of time, right? They should live close to you. They should be able to get to your children quickly. They should be able to care for your children with minimal disruption to your children's everyday life. So maybe it's another parent at their school who can pick them up and take them back and forth, etc. But minimal disruption to their normal schedule, because this is a temporary moment and we really do want to be able to calm sort of anxieties and fears. The second is your permanent guardian. This is the long-term choice. This is the person who has the legal right to take permanent custody of your child and raise them to adulthood. They do not have to live anywhere near you if you don't want them to, okay? They also have the authority to make all future decisions for your child. And they can be the same person as the emergency guardian. It is important to note that guardianship is not parentage. Guardianship is temporary until your child reaches the age of 18. So they do not become inheritors of the people who are their guardians, right? Like, it's not an adoption. So just to keep that in mind. The third is your emergency healthcare guardian. This is the person who has the legal right to make healthcare decisions for your child while you're either gone temporarily, right? On vacation or sick yourself. There's an emergency medical authorization form. It was included in the packet that I just sent off in the download, so that form is there as well. You will have 2 of these guardianships already taken care of once you get that form filled out. This can also be the same person as your emergency guardian. I recommend it because if you're giving them the kid in the emergency, they probably should be able to also make healthcare decisions. The last one is a special needs guardian. This is an ongoing guardianship. This is the person who's going to care for your child well into adulthood and beyond. All other guardianship ends at 18. This one will continue until that child passes away. And so we need to think about who's the first person and who would be the backups in that case. So summarizing, I hope you guys know the importance of choosing a good guardian. I hope I have beaten that into your heads at this point. The vital factors of making that decision, what the 4 types of guardians are, and then the need to have legal documents in place to give these guardians the authority to act. It is not appropriate to just say, I had a conversation with my parents. If they can't produce a document signed and notarized by the parents, the courts must get involved. So estate planning is very different, right? For our generation and for us, when we have minor kids, our considerations are, how do we support our children into adulthood? How do we get them at least to 18, if not beyond, with our wisdom, with our values, with encouragement? If I am not around to encourage Emerson, right, and show him that I'm proud of him, the only thing that I've left behind is my estate. And so I have to use my estate to then do the things that I can't do because I'm not physically here. So what are your estate planning options? The basic estate planning document is a basic will. The advantages of it, it prevents the state from making these decisions for you. It's where you will name guardians. The disadvantage, if your estate is over a certain threshold, it is a one-way ticket to probate court. Probate is, again, going back to the death probate that we talked about in the beginning. Yes, you have named where your assets go, but the probate court would still have to be involved in the transfer. There's no disability protection. There's very little flexibility, and there is an outright distribution to your children, which means once you pass away, those assets will go to the kids, and the guardians would be in charge of managing those assets on their behalf until they hit the age of 18. And then at 18, they would inherit 100% of your estate, well, whatever's left. So what is a trust? A trust is like a tube of toothpaste, right? Best visual. Put all of your assets inside of it. If you squeeze that toothpaste and squeeze all of it out all over the counter, you will never get that toothpaste back into that tube of toothpaste, and it will never go back in the same form. It will be permanently altered, and you will lose lots of it trying to get it back in. With your trust, if you dole it out in small, tiny little pieces, controlled tiny little pieces, you will continue to have those assets inside of that trust or that toothpaste inside of that tube of toothpaste for a long period of time. And it will stay protected, and you will be able to continue to use it for a long period of time. So I like to think of a trust that way. A good estate plan should protect your family. It should provide financial incentives for your kids. That's big. I know more than my son. He's 2.5. I should know more than him. So I know how to incentivize him with money or encourage him to do certain things by making it a benefit, financial benefit, right? I also know that if his parent has died and he's inherited all of this money, there's going to be a certain sadness that's going to be there. And there's something that, we like to call little shopping habit, right? People go out and they shop to feel better. And then they get this thing called buyer's remorse, and it just becomes a problem. I'm going to help him not do that by putting serious restrictions on what the resources can actually be used on. No, you cannot go buy a Bugatti, but you can have a Honda Civic, right? That's affordable, easy to maintain, etc. I'm going to put that limitation in there. So that means you can't go spend my money on stupid stuff. I can also give him divorce protection, right? Built it right into his estate plan. He's 2.5. So it's a little odd to be thinking about him getting married and then subsequently divorced. But whatever plan I make today is what he is stuck with for life. So if I don't think about it today, he doesn't get it later, and he can't just add it back in. So thinking about, well, what's the possibility that sometime down the road that might happen? Let me just make a plan for it, because for my values, I don't want half of what I've worked for walking out with a departing spouse, right? I can provide disability protection for myself before death, and your estate plan should do that. And then keeping your inheritance, your children's inheritance, safe from creditors, con artists, and lawsuits. That's a big one. Creditor protection is something that we can give our kids and our parents can give us, but we can't really give ourselves. It's got to come from the previous generation, which means we have to be thinking about it. Also, this is a big one for me, separation of duties. I don't want the same people who are taking care of my child also managing his money. That seems a little counterintuitive, but I want a checks and balance. If the guardians say, oh, you know what, we've got to move to a new house so that we can have a bigger house for all these kids we have now, and so we can get a public school education in a great school district. All of those sound like reasonable things. Except if you don't have the resources to do that, and you start looking to my son's inheritance to use that as the down payment for this new house, my son is not adopted by you. So when he turns 18, you're no longer his guardian. So you have just used my son's inheritance to build your own children's financial future, because he can't inherit that house without an estate plan that specifically designates him. But yet, if the guardian said, hey, we want to get a bigger house, we want to do these things, we don't have the resources for it, my son's trustee could say, yep, those sound like really reasonable things. Here's what we can do. We can loan you the money, right? The Bank of Emerson's Trust will loan you the down payment money on certain terms that then needs to be repaid with a lien against the house, right? Because my 2.5-year-old isn't going to know to do that. Or the trustee could say, how about this? We'll buy the house, the trust will own it, and you guys can pay rent there. Keep your other house, do something else. But those are only things somebody can do if they're separate and apart from the initial decision, right? Separating out those duties to make sure my child's inheritance is going to be protected and my wishes and goals for setting up that estate plan are honored. And then there's the yours, mine, ours, right? Every single family is unique, whether you are single, divorced, blended, you have a different challenge, particularly in blended families, because your biological child is not in the line of succession for a step parent. Scenario, married, right? I've got Emerson, I get remarried, and we start buying houses together. Well, that's community property, right? In California, it's community property, marital property in other states. Something happens to me, I die, my spouse gets it all. My child can't inherit from my new spouse. They're not adopted, that's not their child. And so if they pass away without an estate plan, my son has just been disinherited because I didn't even think about him. Right? And lots of people say, oh, you know, but I think of them as my kid. Thinking about them as their kid is wonderful. But if you don't have documents in place that specifically outline that this person you want to benefit with your estate, they won't. And we have these situations where somebody's siblings, right, that they might not even have talked to in decades, are now the beneficiaries of this estate, and the child that was raised with this couple got nothing. And so blended families have very unique estate planning challenges that you have to think about. So why do we do this? I hope at this point it's clear, it's a passion of ours, but this is just stuff that people don't know. And we're seeing so many families and children specifically disinherited or stuck in a court system just because somebody didn't know that they needed these things. They're little tweaks, but they have a huge impact on what can happen down the road. So what would your perfect plan look like? It should include your provisions for long-term guardians, right? Who would be the permanent people to take your children if you were to pass away? It would include your proper legal documents, the emergency medical forms and the emergency guardian forms. You have those already. I just gave them to you. Complete instructions for raising your kids. And that, I know that sounds weird. Trust me, it does. But who knows your children and your family and your routine better than you? And if I had to step in and take care of your kids for you, do I know who their pediatrician is? Or if they're up to date on their vaccines? Or if your youngest child needs Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star sung 3 times in a row with their special bear in their blanket? No. But if I come into your house and I don't know these things, it's going to be a lot harder for me to care for them and for them to feel like they're being cared for. So instructions for raising your kids is actually really important. And then you need to have a mechanism for capturing your values and your family history and your life experiences, the things that are important to you, the things that make you tick and keep going, right? We want to be able to share those with our kids, even if we're not there. So your guardian's journal is going to have this information. It's going to have your family information, right? And if, let's say your spouse's sister is the one who takes your kids in, does she know your family and the people you would want your kids to remain connected to on your side of the family? Or are they just going to be spending time with, your spouse's family? How do you keep those connections going and make sure that your children understand their family history from both sides? You've got to write it down, right? Emergency information. Is your child deathly allergic to peanuts? Or do they have a grass allergy? That's something you don't really want a guardian finding out the hard way, right? Healthcare. Do they have any medical conditions that somebody needs to know about? Day-to-day routine. How do we continue the routine to give them stability? Because if we just have to create one, it will be chaos for a while until we establish our own routine, or you can sort of tell me how it works, right? 8 a.m., cereal, blah, 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 blah. We get in the car, we go do this thing, they go to this place, this is their school, this is their teacher. Personal development and abilities. All of our kids are geniuses, right? But they all develop at their own rate and time. And so what are you noticing about your kids, where they are on the developmental scale, and what are their abilities, so that we know how to continue to build them up, right? Education, for me, big, big. And in Los Angeles, the public school system is not great in a lot of areas. And so you really do have to navigate it. I've mapped out sort of my first choice schools all the way through the end of high school for Emerson, and then my second choice and my third. And I've been working on sort of how do I get them into these different schools and X, Y, and Z. Nobody can sort of step in my shoes and know what that plan is unless I write it down and unless I tell them, right? Religious and spiritual. Is it important for you that your children be bat mitzvahed or, have some form of ceremony that maybe your guardian doesn't observe? Right? It might be important to write that down, that you still would like these things to happen. Social and recreational activities. Who's their soccer coach? Right? Where do they practice? Where's the field? Where are the games? What's the schedule? Where can I find that? Where's the money? Right? Financial. Where is the money? How do we pay the mortgage or pay school tuition or pay the doctor on a copay visit? Where are the resources? With the legal, it's also where's your estate plan, right? Where are all of these other pieces? But if you are divorced or you're a single parent and you have full legal and physical custody, you have the right to make these choices, but those documents will need to be inside of the estate plan because your guardian's not going to know, where the custody agreement is, right? Your estate planning letter, and then other important information and instructions that you think they will need, you'll also want to include that. So we do the Guardian's Journal binder. I also do it in the PDF. In fact, we've been sort of going away from the binder entirely because it's easier to update, right? Things are going to change. Every year your child gets a new classroom. So we want to make sure that we are updating the Guardian's Journal and keeping it up to date. It should be a one-stop shop for anyone who has to come in and help manage your family. So we put them on sort of business card size flash drives with all the documents that are stored in there, and then we password protect it. So there are 3 types of child protection plans that we do. We do a basic child protection plan, we do the advanced child protection plan, and then we do legacy wealth planning solutions. And those look a little bit different. The basic child protection plan has all the emergency forms that I just gave you, as well as the Guardian's Journal, a basic last will and testament, which will name your personal representatives, permanent guardians, and can do a distribution plan for your assets, right? It'll also include your durable power of attorney for property, your healthcare power of attorney for yourself, and digital storage of all of your documents. This plan is really only going to work if your assets are below your state's threshold. In California, that's $166,000 gross, which is everything you own, regardless of how much debt, and below. If you are above that threshold, a will is going to be insufficient to avoid the probate process. And that eats up, on average, anywhere from 30% or more of the value of the estate. So we want to avoid that if possible. The second plan is sort of your advanced child protection plan. This is, again, everything from before, except instead of a will, we're doing the testamentary trust. This is where your personal representatives are named, your permanent guardians are named, and there's a flexible distribution plan for your assets, as well as all of the powers of attorney from before. Can I ask you guys, do you have powers of attorney in place right now? I know I put the poll out there. Only seen a few of you. Okay. So it looks like most of you don't have powers of attorney in place. Okay. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions about what powers of attorney are or how they work, you can definitely ask me. Like I said, everybody who sticks to the end gets a 30-minute free consultation with me to ask any of your personal questions that you have from this webinar. We do only ask that it is within the next 2 weeks. And that if you are married, both people are on the call so that we can answer all of your questions at once. The final solution is really the legacy wealth planning solution. So this is everything from before, but it creates a legacy wealth trust, which is a comprehensive distribution for your assets, right? Inside of that trust, you can actually plan for 2 generations beyond you, maximizing some of the estate tax planning benefits that are available, right? Maximizing the current exemption, which is about $11.26 million. You will also have your pour over will. This is where your permanent guardians get named. It's also a safety net in case you didn't fund your trust. Fund means putting the assets actually inside of it. You have your durable power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney. We do help with funding in that. It will avoid probate as well as conservatorships. So if properly executed, you can avoid death probate as well as living probate. You also get the digital storage of all of the documents, and then we do a PowerPoint video of all of the different sections of your plan to really help and make sure that you understand it. So we are coming to the end, but do you remember the 2 obstacles that we talked about from the beginning, right? Procrastination and knowledge. You all now have all of the knowledge and pieces for what you need to have inside of your estate plan to protect your minor kids, particularly in this moment of COVID. So please, please, please go out and do something with that knowledge, because the flip side of not having it, once you need it, it is too late to get it, okay? So I'm gonna make the next steps easy. If you would like to have a 30-minute consultation with me, it is virtual, right? We can do that. You can actually book a time right now, and I'll send that up to you. And then you can ask me any questions you have, any personal questions. If you have any general questions, I'm happy to answer them while we sit here. So Sarah, yes, Sarah's question is, do we need to name healthcare powers of attorney as well as property powers of attorney for our children? So yes, essentially that's the emergency guardianship form, as well as the emergency healthcare form that I just put in the handouts. Those are the powers of attorney essentially for your children. They can be the same people or they can be different people. It's really up to you and who you think would be best suited for those roles. I've had friends who come in who have a brother that's a doctor, but they don't think he would be a good guardian just because he's always busy and in the hospital, but he's great at the medical stuff, and so they wanted him to do the medical decisions and their friend to be the guardian. So really just, it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on what your needs are and your family structure. Any other questions? You can actually put them right in the chat box. So doing a comprehensive estate plan takes, James's question is, how long does it take to get an estate plan together? Doing a legacy wealth plan takes anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks. Really, that depends a lot on how quickly the client gets back the asset booklet for us to be able to help with the funding. We generally need about 2 weeks after the asset meeting and to get all the funding letters in order. So yeah, anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so I just got a note that the link to the calendar is not working. So let me try that again. And technology. Can't live with it, can't live without it, so they say. Let me see if I can get you directly in. Try that one and let me know if that will take you all the way to the calendar. So, and then how we do it on the virtual call, we can either do it by call or we can do it by video chat. We've been using either Skype or, BlueJean has been my new favorite. It's a great way to sort of connect and get everybody in. Part of the agenda is we're going to have our questions. And so I will ask you about your family and your needs and any information that I need to gather to help understand your estate planning needs. And then the second part of that will be your questions. And then we'll get all of those answered as well. And then part 3 is, if there's a fit, does the plan that we've sort of put together make sense for your family? And if so, then we'll say yes and we'll go right then. If not, we'll say no, no's okay, but we only ask that we make a decision at that point in time. So don't let this happen to you, right? Don't wait until you need this to get it done. The risk to our children and to our families is just too great. The time is now. Oh, I'm so glad that it worked, right? As Pablo Picasso has famously said, only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to have died undone, right? So don't let this be it. If you guys have no more questions, I am going to sign off and say bye, and hopefully I will chat with you some more soon. Oh, sorry, one more question. Rachel would like to know, where can you get some more resources? Yes. So I'm going to send a couple of reports into the handout section right now that you can download. They are estate planning with minor children. It breaks down all of these different pieces that we talked about and gives you a general overview on that information. And the other one is the Estate Planning Basics Report, which talks about the Family Wealth Trust and different types of estate planning documents that can be used when creating your estate plan and how they function. Those are also in the handout section where you can just click download. If anything doesn't work, I would be happy to email you directly. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking this hour out of your day to talk about estate planning. I know it is not everybody's favorite topic, but the peace of mind you get when it's all taken care of right is just unimaginable. So talk to you soon. Thank you so much and stay safe.